You don't know it, get us down right now. I guess I'm just going to break it down for you.
All right, episode 90 of Three Brothers Talking has begun. We are off to the races, and yeah, I mean, it feels good. Feels like we're closing in on 100. We're making a big deal about 100 because who'd have thought that we get to 100 episodes? Am I right? And we haven't gotten there yet, so maybe we should not brag so much until we actually do get there. However,
I think it's good to brag because then it'll force us to do it.
that's
Positive vibes only, Dave.
That's my thought.
Yeah.
If we like put it out there enough, we will.
I'm projecting.
We will do it if only to avoid embarrassment. So, by the way, I'm David,
I'm Andrew.
I'm Jeremy.
and tonight we are. Well, not tonight. I say that every time. We're recording this at night. We almost always record at night because we all have kids, and so once they get to bed, we get to record.
And we have jobs and,
we have
stuff
jobs
too.
and all that. So we are going to talk tonight about a topic that is all around the internet these days, and talking about stuff going on with Matt Chandler and the Village Church and what that makes us think. But first, rather, what are you guys drinking tonight?
So, in honor of it basically being the introduction of fall, I do have my first Oktoberfest of the season. Great Lakes,
Nice.
specifically.
Yeah, a classic.
So I don't know. This was the first week back in stores, gearing up for football season. I'm excited. Getting the fantasy team up and running, all that jazz.
What is your
Go Justin
guys'
Fields.
What is your guys' rule on like when you start drinking like an Oktoberfest beer? As soon as it
Oktoberfest?
hits the shelf.
When it gets in the
Yeah,
store.
when it drops in the store.
When it gets in the shelf, man, you can have it. Well, I mean, you should take it home first. You shouldn't drink it in the
Just
car on the way
crack
home.
it open in the store.
You should take it to your location where you're allowed to enjoy it, and then enjoy it when you can.
Hey, if
Preferably after the kids go to
if
bed.
they let you have it
Yeah.
in the store, why not? Just
I mean,
finish
why
your
not?
grocery
I
shopping.
mean, a bar is technically a giant store.
In a
technically.
way.
Because you guys
Yeah.
know, I mean, for me, Oktoberfest is the best of the seasonal.
Yeah, I would
beers.
agree.
As
See,
far
we're
as
different.
I'm not a big fan of the Christmas sales. I mean, they're fine for every now and then, but you guys know I'm more of an IPA guy, and I like more of the
You're
bitter
into that.
ends. But there's something about Oktoberfest. That's the one that I would typically go for, and so I go for them as soon as they're ready. Yeah.
I feel like I hold
See,
off
I
until
am enjoying
September,
one of those-
but that's fair.
Yeah. Andrew, I am enjoying a Sam Adams Oktoberfest. It's just good old reliable.
There you go.
It's good. You're getting it comes out every year. But I'm a winter person myself. If I have a choice of seasonal beers.
You
and
guys
then
go
I
more for the
Oktoberfest.
porters and stouts than I do.
It's true.
So
Yeah, we like them dark and heavy.
I'm drinking some
You-
cinnamon,
Oolong.
some sweet cinnamon tea.
Mm.
It's very good.
Delicious. That's my bedtime
Yeah.
thing. My bedtime routine.
This is
hey, a good cup of tea at the
Hey,
end of the day is
let me
worth
tell you this.
that.
Yeah, man.
anybody looking for a tea recommendation, let me give it to you.
Okay.
Kroger has the high quality store brand. It's called private label or private selection, I think. So it's it's a Kroger brand, but it's a nice Kroger brand. Okay.
Elevated Kroger.
'Cause it doesn't actually say Kroger on it. But
Yeah.
they have a tea that I think is called sweet cinnamon tea, and it is actually phenomenal and would be very good for this time of year, although I do drink it all year long. So I'm drinking it tonight because my voice is still kind of hoarse because 2 days ago I preached 3 sermons at church, and then we had a members meeting at night, which meant more speaking. So there's lots of honey in the tea, and we're still kind of recouping a little bit from that.
David's been doing a lot of talking.
Lots of talking. What else is new?
And then we're going to follow up with our podcast where David
Oh,
talks.
my
Yeah,
goodness.
where David talks a lot.
Because people just can't get enough.
That's what they say.
And if our statistics are any indication, that's totally true. No.
We should do a poll on that. Say, hey, whose voice
We do,
is the most wonderful?
You know the focus group thing where people have a dial And like during
Do we
a
have that?
no, but like during a commercial, they'll test a commercial or like a speaker and how likable they are they'll give everybody a dial. And
By the reception.
like while people
Yeah.
are speaking, people in a focus group will like be turning the dial from like 100 to 0, basically like how much they like the person speaking. And that's how they judge, like especially politicians and stuff like that. Use it
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we got on
Basically,
but
how their voice comes across and all that, like
yes.
what their perception is. Yeah.
So we're just grateful we don't have those kind of in-depth statistics for the podcast, because none of the three of us want to know like when the dial is going up and when it's going down. We all like to believe that the dial is just always at the top, or at least always at the top for us.
All three of our voices are singing a sweet song.
That's right. Yeah. So tonight we are going to talk. There's no transition into the topic. So
Hard cut
here
here.
we are. Tonight we are going to talk about everything going on at the Village Church in Texas with Matt Chandler, and he's I don't believe he's stepped down. He's on a leave of absence, which I saw at first. I saw a bunch of stuff about him stepping down, and then I looked into it. I'm like, that's actually not true. So he didn't step down, to my knowledge. He's just on a leave of absence. And the other elders of the church recommended that he do that, and he agreed to it. I believe it's indefinite. We're not big, like, this will bleed through into the purpose of the podcast as a whole, but none of us have spent hours like exhaustively searching into this, because I think in a certain way, none of us really think it's our business just because we don't go to that church.
Yeah.
There's a certain ferocity all three of us would be attacking this story with if it was closer to us or it was a church that we went to.
Yeah.
I had friends that went to the Village Church for a long time. To my knowledge, none of them do anymore. They go to church plants that the Village started. So they're technically not related anymore to all this. I could be wrong there, but I think that's the case. So, if you guys don't know, Jeremy might be able to help me fill in some of the gaps here. But I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago that the Village Church on a Sunday morning announced that Matt would be stepping down. Matt himself made the announcement that there was a relationship that had pretty much gone on mainly through social media, through direct messaging between him and a female, a woman in the congregation, that Matt's wife knew about, and this woman's husband also knew about, and they were conceivably okay with it. They had started messaging. I don't know what started it, but they became good friends. They talked a lot, apparently. So then a friend of this woman came to Matt after a service and said, "I'm uncomfortable with how you are talking to my friend." I believe that was what it was, basically.
Yep.
And that's when Matt said he was a little thrown by that. I think he used the word disoriented, because he, I guess, didn't think that it was anything bad.
Over the top. Yeah.
And
Out of
to
line.
his credit, he immediately went to the other elders and said, like, somebody just told me this. I don't know. What do we want to do? All this. So then they talked about it. I believe that they had somebody investigate it. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yes, third
Yeah.
party.
Third party investigate it, which seems like a really intense move right away. But
Yeah.
so they had that happen. To my knowledge, nobody has found or even accused any sexual misconduct or even like romantic messaging between them. They've said
One step back,
go ahead,
Dave. Sorry. Interjecting the fact that before he brought it to the elders, he did bring up to the person who brought it up and to the elders that his wife and her husband were aware that they were talking, and were all privy to the same information.
Yeah.
I think that's an important point to have here as well. Nothing was hidden from anyone's spouses in this.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a secret relationship that happened. But everyone apparently decided, especially the other elders, decided that this friendship was too close. It was not. It was at least indicating too much of a closeness or a friendliness or a deepening relationship between Matt and this woman who was not his wife, is not his wife. So they said this is not unhealthy, it's not right, and they placed him on leave. Both, in their words, was disciplinary and for healing, both the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they called it was like a disciplinary leave, but also they haven't really said he's like under church discipline. Believe they said they don't think that he's disqualified. They expect him to be the pastor after this, to my knowledge. So I think that's more. I bet we'll come up with more details as we talk about it more. But I think that's kind of where we're at. I don't know if you guys think I missed anything in that little rundown or not.
No, I think that's where we're at currently. I mean, yeah, stories can develop.
And this was all announced during, I think it was Sunday evening, and it was also live streamed.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a public thing, not just
they certainly
village church thing, which I think is important to note too in this discussion, as it has been made a public thing.
Yeah.
I think
by them, it wasn't like a closed meeting.
Yeah, I think that they probably. This will sound like just a PR move, but I don't think it's dirty just because it's a PR move. I think that they said,
no, I don't think
he's
so.
going to be on leave. Let's do it publicly, because if he just disappears, like that's probably
it's going to be worse.
Well, especially with how large of an image he does have in the community, and as far as a following goes, with people listening in for his sermons and all that.
Yeah.
Like he can't just drop off and
Speaking
so
of podcast
I understand
stats,
that.
I don't know what the Village Church ranks at with podcasts, but I would bet that the sermons of the Village Church of Matt's sermons are actually pretty high on the iTunes charts. I would guess.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Week to week. He's somebody that has taught all of us a whole lot over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's a very talented speaker. Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you guys think as we start to talk about this? As with most of our conversations, this probably won't be very structured. But what do you think? What comes to mind when all this comes? When this news first hits you, when you start thinking about it, what comes to mind?
I guess my initial thought, I've seen a couple different articles responding to it and all that, since this all broke. And I don't know, from my perspective, I think the first thing is really to try to take your thoughts captive and not in these situations, don't interject or don't jump beyond all what we're saying here. None of us are attached to this congregation specifically. None of us are a part of this church. None of us are particularly close to following, Matt Chandler himself. So it's very easy from the outside and people writing and commentating on it to possibly blur lines and all that, and interject from other accounts and history of misconduct and stuff like that, which isn't actually known here and isn't at least how we have seen everything portrayed thus far and how they announce this all publicly. It seems like the right, to me, the right steps were taken until we know more. And I don't want to say I'm not saying I have any say on how they govern their own individual church as well. And that's what nobody from the outside, should really be doing either. So I guess that's where my initial thoughts goes.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I think that I was surprised by it, especially from, I guess, who he is. And especially, I don't know, he's been in the limelight for a long time.
Yeah.
He's written a lot of books on relationships and stuff. And granted, I also want to say that I think that he's been pretty good about this whole thing. I think that he did the best that he could. All the while, I think that he was unwise, as everyone can see. I appreciate that they are being cautious in this kind of a thing. And I'm glad also it's not a, like, from all the other stuff that's happened from his quote-unquote celebrity pastor, for lack of a better phraseology, we've seen over the past forever. This one hits hard because of who it is, but also it seemed like it's been done with integrity and was not a, like, adultery thing, which is typically in the run-of-the-mill stuff.
And you,
like, this doesn't seem like it's a Me Too thing as far as a person goes or anything like that. And for someone who is as big of a personality as he is to not have that, I guess.
And my other,
I'm somewhat happy. I mean, I hate to say I'm happy about it, but I think that there's been some, like,
you almost expect the worst.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
especially when you hear Matt, like, you see a headline, Matt Chandler steps down, you think, oh no.
Yeah.
What's going on? Because everyone in our circles know who Matt Chandler is. And lots of people who aren't in our circles know who Matt Chandler is.
Well, and I was like, that's what we've gotten to as far as, like, other evidence. Like, we've seen time and time again that it is actually relationships that have gone too far, and have, been unwise and then developed into something that is misconduct. And that's why, like, hopefully, again, like, we don't know all the stuff. We don't know. We aren't reading all the transcripts and all that, but hopefully this is a point of caution that is dealt with up front. And it's that, this relationship was unwise and we stopped it before it became anything misconduct wise or disqualifying wise of him as a pastor. And, like, hopefully that's the case.
Yeah.
But, like, we don't know. And, like, that can happen. You think about, it's just like the high calling of a pastor in that to be cautious of the relationships they're maintaining, because also this can be construed as, like, it could be, it could be completely, on level, from Matt Chandler's perspective, it could be 100% pure intention. It could be, he's safeguarding himself. He's being transparent with his wife, like, nothing above board. And yet on the other party, which is a woman in his congregation, then this relationship could have divulged into something that could be unhealthy down the line in her mentality and how she's portraying or, like, construing things. Yeah. And so that's something that, like, as a pastor, you have to guard against too, is, like, it can be different from both parties' perspectives on how these things come across.
Yeah. And I would say, go back to the first point real fast. Like, I think the lesson that we should learn is, like, to be a little slow to speak, because, given what we know of very limited information from the outside, which, caveat number one, maybe that's all we're ever supposed to know. There are situations where more people deserve to know than just the local congregation, but there's a lot of situations where only the local congregation deserves to know. So what we do know now, they chose to make public. Our prayer is that what they made public is a faithful representation, and that they will act obediently in accordance with that. And it seems like they are, again, from the perspective we have. So we don't want to be guilty, and nobody should want to be guilty of saying something false, but, like, I don't know, too positive or too, like, what's the word? Like, flattering of Matt. Yeah. It could end up being false. You don't want to do that. Yeah. And you also don't want to end up saying something that is untrue and also slams them for something that they're actually not guilty of. So all that said, Andrew, to your point about the high calling, like, I think that one thing that we have to understand is that you just talked about the dynamic for, like, it could have been Matt could have never thought about it this way, and it could have, and she could have developed an attachment to him, to this friendship that wasn't healthy. It could have worked in the other direction as well.
Yeah.
But also,
I was just it could go either direction.
but also it could happen even if both of them have completely fine intentions. Like that, I think they spoke of familiarity, which is a word I cannot say.
It's a hard
Being
one, man.
too familiar.
Like Wednesday.
Yeah, being too familiar with one another, and like losing a healthy boundary that you should have. Not just with people who aren't in your family, but also people of the opposite sex who you're not married to. There should be a healthy boundary there, and frequency and stuff can tear down that boundary a little too much. And so one or both parties could be innocent in their mind, and it still could not be good. And if you're a pastor, be very aware of that, I think.
I think the big word there is it could be very unwise.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I just think
to not guard against, especially if you're a pastor.
The situation as described by them so far is one where both people seem pretty genuinely innocent, but it was still not a good idea.
Yeah.
And that's a warning that we should take, I guess, is like, I don't know, like you should think where your heart is, and your heart might be in a perfectly fine place, but then you can still consider, my heart might be fine, their heart seems fine, but what about, there's more considerations than just that, I guess is what I'm saying. Like you can sit there and say, oh, I'm not attracted to them. Okay. But that's not the only criteria. There's more to it than that.
Yeah, because who knows? Like you're getting at from a familiarity perspective, it's at the least, like if that, who knows? Like if you play that out further and you allow those types of relationships to continue, then possibly you do come from a communication perspective, from a identifying with perspective, you are possibly working in another someone else that should be the rightful place of your spouse. And like that could be just on a communication level and stuff like that. That is not the way that the relationship is intended to be. And like that's something too, where like you're not truly, I guess you're cheapening your relationship with your spouse and what that is intended to be as well.
Yeah. I think that just makes me think that you do actually have to. I think that it's a little uncool to think this way in our day and age. However, I think that, especially as a pastor, I just think people in general, and I would say men specifically, should know themselves and their surroundings well enough to know that they should set up boundaries, and they should not be ashamed of having boundaries. Like, I know that it's like, it's sort of, we're in a weird cultural moment where it's both like uncool to be Mike Pence with the Billy Graham rule, right? When it was like, I don't ride in a car with a woman who's not my wife by myself. And people are like, what a loser. And then on the other side of the coin, it's like, we are also hyper aware of inappropriate relationships and stuff, right? Between the sexes.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement, honestly, to pastors would be like, set boundaries and don't care like who says that they're overprotective or they're a little ancient or whatever. I just, for me, it's like, who cares? Like, wouldn't you rather be a little uncool than make this mistake? Or a bigger one, a much bigger one.
Yeah. Well, it's like, and it could outright disqualify you from, your ministry that you possibly work so hard to pursue.
And here's what else I would say. Jeremy, you can jump in after this thought here, but like, you should know yourself and your own heart well enough to know where you should set your boundaries for yourself. So, okay, somebody else thinks that they're a little too restrictive or they're a little too loose. Okay, you're the one that has to stand in front of God with your conscience. So like, you know, you know your temptations, you know what feels too far, too short, whatever. Set up a boundary. I would say like, make sure your spouse is hyper okay with it, whatever that boundary is. I know for like Rachel and I, even last week we were talking about this, and we even just had a little impromptu talk. Now that I'm going to be having more meetings in the church, it was just like, hey, what are the circumstances under which, like, I would meet with a female member of the congregation? What are the circumstances I would not given that we're by ourselves? In terms of like, what locations do we think are good? What, you know, like that kind of stuff. And I just think, don't be afraid of having actual rules like that. It feels, I don't know, people will accuse you maybe of being legalistic or backwards, but wouldn't you rather not have to deal with this, is my thought.
Right. Well, and
to protect you and protect
place.
them. It's not just about protecting me. It's about serving your congregation better, every member of it, male and female.
Right. Well, when you think about anything, I mean, even like, not necessarily female, like, there's wisdom in all these things. When and where you do these things, how you do these things, setting up the safeguards, and also bringing others in for accountability, like the other elders and other, not even just elders, but even close men or friends who can come alongside to help you and say, hey, I think you're out of line here. Here's why. And your wife obviously has that jurisdiction as well. But even thinking like, I mean, we were all involved with, have kids involved with kids or coaching, like, there's stuff you take and you stuff you think like, okay, this is unwise. This is when we can and can't meet. This is how, like, there are safeguards for many things already outlined and also not outlined. And that's where knowing yourself is important, knowing your shortfalls, but also having someone else who knows your shortfalls is important. Because so often we can become overconfident in our own ability. Because, I mean, the pride of life and stuff creeps in. And think, I got this handled. And it's like, no, someone else needs to come and say, no, you don't have this handled. Which kind of seems like a little more happened here, saying, okay, take a step back. Yeah. Your blinders are a little bit, you need to go look through your lenses are a little foggy here.
Matt, if you really looked at this,
which
you'd
is
think it was
better to do that up front.
Basically,
Right. If you're looking at it from my perspective, you might be thinking differently. So all that is good and having good hard rules, but also sometimes the hard rules, like sometimes some things can be too dogmatic to a degree.
Rules cannot save you, and they can't save you from that.
Right, rules alone don't save you.
You'll find a way around them.
Yeah, right. If you want to, you will. That's sin.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think that's all wise and to a degree, and it seems like that's kind of what's happening here. Yeah, I don't really have much more to add than that. I mean, like I said, hopes and prayers, and we should all be praying for Matt and the church and Acts 29 and other leaders that, like I said earlier, if you're going to step away for a short period of time, like this is indefinite. How long that is, we don't know. Hopefully it's shorter rather than later. I don't know what kind of, like, they haven't said what gets him to come back. Yeah. But I'm sure they are working on that to a degree. But pray that I guess from the perspective of commending Matt and saying, hey, like, and the elders saying, like, maybe this wasn't 100% the greatest decision, but it's the best decision. They're going to all stand before God and say, we made the decision that was not best for shepherding Matt and this woman and our people. So I guess just pray for resolve in that, and we have other men who want to take resolve in lots of areas in life. Responsibility.
I just think, like, I would rather, I don't know, the way that you have to think about it is, like, I'm just thinking about the boundaries thing more. Like, would you rather have these boundaries in your life and stick to them, and maybe you, like, I don't know, maybe you played it a little safe, but that's better than invalidating yourself in front of the whole church. And more so, just think about, I mean, so this kind of thing could be weird for, like, so I'll use the word nothing just because it's the only thing. So nothing could have happened here, right? In terms of, like, what we would traditionally call adultery or something like that. That's what I mean when I say that word. not a perfect term for this conversation, but it's the only one I can think of. So like nothing could have happened, but don't think that like, again, Matt's wife knew about this, but like, is it still weird for their kids, you think? Like, don't you think it's a little weird for his kids if they just hearing this story, like, and how heartbreaking would that be for you as a dad? You could be in a situation just like this, and your kids could go a whole bunch of their life thinking, yeah, Dad did have this one friend that always kind of was a little strange. And how that could invalidate you in their eyes. That's something that you should want to protect against as a man. You shouldn't want to become a legalistic, hyper, border or like rule drawing, whatever. Like, I'm not telling you to become something like that, but you should want to really guard against that. Like, you should want your kids, when you're gone or when you're older or whatever, you should want your kids to have every confidence that, like, my dad really did only love my mom forever. And I think that's worth inconvenience of some boundaries and stuff like that.
Especially when you think about the world we live in today, and that example being, as far as what your kids are potentially going to see out there in the world from other influences and other friends and all that, like, you want to be that difference, like, and that needs to be shown. You want to be difference in the world where every person around you thinks, like, even a non-Christian would think, like, yeah, that pastor's kind of crazy, or that guy's kind of crazy, but you know what, like, if it's a woman, I always felt safe around him, or if it's a man, I would have trusted him with my wife, right? Like that kind of thought. You do want to actually have that testimony in front of people. And that just, I don't know, Jeremy, what you said of just like, if you think that you have this handled, that's dangerous. I mean, that's dangerous territory.
Yeah, like the verse of, if any man thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall, right? Just don't. You should be vigilant about this in your life as a man, whether you're a pastor or not. There's a million different temptations for every kind of man that this seeps into. When
you think about this, like, especially in this age too, where it's so easy for these relationships and stuff like that to creep in. Like this was direct messages largely.
Probably started off with memes and stuff,
Yeah, like it can, just texting and social media, whatever else you want to throw in. Like, we have so many ways to communicate and, develop these relationships in synthetic ways and all that. That you gotta have your guard up and have kind of rules to know, like you're saying, like, know yourself in all aspects. And you hope, I was like, I mean, my big thought is just, you hope in the end this is good for that congregation as a whole. You hope it's like a kind of a preemptive corrective measure for both that ladies walk and that congregation as a whole, that they can continue on as a faithful body, and that the elders that around God Matt
sharpen them in this. I would say my closing thought that just popped into my head is, like, I would think it's a pretty good question to kind of almost constantly be asking ourselves of, how can I give myself more fully to my spouse? Like, just at my attention, my affection, like, how can I just make sure that all of that is getting poured out exactly where it needs to be on my wife, on my husband? Because that's like the antidote to a lot of this, is not just rules. It's like, delight more in the wife of your youth. That's one of the and for women, if you're tempted to find anything like friendship or too much of a friendship in this kind of realm, you just want to give yourself more to your husband, and vice versa. That's something that,
And like,
yeah.
yeah, like that's something you could pray for too.
Yep.
Like,
God, give
that-
me a
that
heart
should be an
more
honor.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jeremy, you got a
Heart.
closing thought?
That's good. No, I think one thing, I guess, jumping off what you said, I agree with it 100%. Pray we all grow in that. Also, pray for your local elders and the men of your church. Just let's not even go elders, but the men of your church and the wives to be faithful to each other and to pour into, to what you said, and to encourage the people around you to do that. I guess don't make fun of people who sit there and say, I want to spend time with my wife. Like, sometimes that's the world we live in. I would probably say that's the best way to handle most things. In a constantly connected world, if someone say, I want to spend unadulterated, undivided time with my wife right now, I don't think that we should discourage that in
Yeah.
those cases.
with all the influences that can be outside of that, that's probably
Well, even
yeah.
like with your phone and with Facebook, with Instagram, with
Yeah.
everything pulling for your attention, work 100% of the time, kids, which are all in themselves not bad things, but when they're all constantly pulling,
Yeah.
and we can live in these virtual silos without really living in them from each other and be divided.
Yep.
I guess pray for unity for our own spouses, like you said, David. Too.
Yeah. That's good.
All
That's
I got.
good, man. Jeremy's always here to like encourage us to pray for the people actually in our backyard.
Well, I just know that I need to grow in.
I just know I need
so
prayer.
That's what I'm trying to do more of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right on.
100% know I need that, man.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that thought and that focus. But
Man, and we just wrapped that up as I was finishing my last sip of
perfectly
Oktoberfest.
timed.
That makes two of us. We paced
Good
well.
job, guys.
I guess that means we're in the episode now. That's how this works.
Yeah.
We need to learn how to run every episode on that tight of a ship, that tight of a schedule.
Exactly the
That's
length
actually
of
the title.
a beer.
That's one of our tightest ship episodes yet. Let's not ruin it though
yeah.
by what we're
gotcha.
doing now. Today we should just end it.
The ship is still tight. But thanks for listening. Next episode should be episode 91. That's how these normally go.
That's math
well,
right there.
It's the final
Really
countdown.
quickly, the last episode got released as episode 88, even though 89 came out before that, because 88 was already recorded.
Whoa.
So,
David's dyslexic.
Whoa!
time traveling. Anyway,
We just like to mess with our listeners.
just make sure people are
Keep
paying
everybody on
attention.
their toes.
Yeah.
I'll say share this episode.
No
if
one
you
was.
Think,
Yeah.
no one
They're
noticed,
like, oh, whatever. Yeah.
They're like, that's the least of our worries. Okay.
Yeah.
No, if you thought this was beneficial, hopefully it was. Hopefully it was encouraging. Share it with somebody. Again, it's the only way our podcast gets around is people sharing it one-on-one with each other. So send it out to a friend and send it out to your spouse. How about that? They might already listen,
Yeah.
but send it out to them anyway.
Andrew, make sure Kaylee hears us, your
Yeah.
wife.
I will.
All three of us.
Yes.
All three of us will do
Get
our
it on
part,
the car.
and we'll send it to our
to play it
spouses.
for
We'll
our
get at
wives.
least 3 listeners.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, then, until next time, we'll see you next time.